right, gentlemen, today we're discussing deloads. When, if you need them, who needs them, maybe, I don't know, maybe more overarching stuff.
Yeah, that was Happy Friday right before Easter, man.
Yeah.
Good Friday.
What a life, man. We're going to sit here and talk fitness while we sip Greenville IPA from Brewery 85. This was brought over to us, one of our members. So Brewery 85, if you're watching and you want to send us some more beers, cheers.
Yeah. We'll take them.
See, I love a good IPA, though.
It's good, yeah. I'm not a big IPA person, but that's really good. Yeah. So that
the
says
is better,
something.
man.
Yeah.
Good strong. Oh, it wakes you up in the morning. So everybody know it is 140. This is legal.
Yeah,
we're fine.
that's right.
All right, so let's start with deloads. I think we're going to try and each maybe take a different approach to it. So you were thinking maybe strength, and when you have athletes deload in here versus when you have, or when do athletes need deload, particularly when they are trying to reach a 1 rep maximum or improve strength as it pertains to loading a movement.
I go back and forth with this. I absolutely understand the value of deloading, just allowing the athlete to take a break. And I'm not a big fan of deloads in the sense that we don't do anything. My deloads always consist of some activity. Now, depending on where they're at in their training, so for instance, if I have someone that is this is their first block, completely new to training, that first deload, I'm going to be sneaky. I'm probably going to lower the percentage a little, but I'm also going to increase the repetition some.
Sure.
So we don't miss out on the volume. It's we can deload, which is the literal term, take weight off the bar. We can devolume, just bring down the total volume, which I don't think is always probably the best way to help an athlete, because what's the purpose of deload? Helping them catch up, right? Recover a little extra so that they're ready for the next cycle of training. Mm-hmm. So whenever I do have a deload, I almost always bring down the load first. Bringing back the volume is helpful, and I'll bring down the volume for sure, depending on how many stages they're in. But when and how, we've all thrown in deloads anywhere between 4, 5, maybe even 6 weeks. But the person should be assessed, analyze what can they handle, because the goal is to continue to push them just about as long as you can, and they're still recovering, right? And when is that time? And that's incredibly hard to figure out. Each athlete is so different, and one athlete says oh, I feel fine, and really they're pretty sore, they're pretty beat up, but they just have a really good tolerance for pain and work. Then you have another athlete who is on their second week, and they're already okay, this is pretty intense, it's pretty tough. It's okay, we haven't done a whole lot yet, so you could probably handle more. So trying to use things we use RPE, RIR, so trying to gauge how much do they have left in the tank, even just general pleasantries. How you feeling? What's going on? Because we don't know anything that goes on for most of these athletes outside of here.
Right.
So I try to keep in the back of my mind. It's I like throwing a deload, even sometimes when I don't think the athlete necessarily needs it, just because I know that life is stressful.
Mental break.
Yeah. And it's almost it's like a reward, like a treat. It's just hey, within about 4 or 5 weeks, I'm going to give you a little break. Earn it. Earn that deal.
True, yeah.
So I really it's if they're not at that point where they've been pushed, they're overreaching some, I like that last week just before deload to let them off the leash a little bit. And this is a trick that I kind of learned from my coach, Trevor Jaffe. So basically gives you hey, as long as you meet the rep range, have fun. You know what I mean? If you can meet those number of reps. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and overshoot, right? But let's say it's a 3x3 and the number was 85%, something like that, right? It's have at it. So if I can get up to 92% for a triple, I might have it.
And you're doing that because the next week you're going to deload anyway, so you might as well take the other time to push it here.
Why not?
Would you not think that maybe rides the line between overexertion to the point of damaging or some sort of...
It could, absolutely, yeah. And I think it's important that I would only use such a trick. He used it for me, but I'm smart enough.
You're training age, you've been doing
how far
enough.
that is. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So a newer athlete, I wouldn't do something like that. I'm going to keep them within a certain range. I want them to be really focusing on just technique. We don't need technique breakdown right away. We just want to reinforce good motor skills. Yeah. So if you get someone who I guess kind of earns our trust, right? Each athlete, I think, to a degree, has to earn their bar, earn that weight. I want to put 300 on the bar. you have to earn it first.
Yeah.
Show me that you can be perfect and good and strong and stable.
Yeah, due diligence,
275,
Right.
and then maybe I'll think about putting 300 on the bar.
Yeah.
Right.
But, a lot of people are obsessed with a number. I just want to get to a number.
Right.
We don't want to cut corners.
Right.
Almost ever, right? So at least for strength training, I mean, it is a lot technique, right? We want to hammer down the skill, so I think there is a point when it's like, if you are continuing to just push volume or just push intensity, eventually the athlete is going to break down. And when you're working with strength athletes, we're working with maximal loads a lot, or sub-maximal loads, but the intensity is at their absolute highest, versus someone who maybe is like bodybuilding, which the goal is just to gain size. So they're not working with the highest weights they can, they're working with isolated movements and getting close to failure, but definitely like not working with one rep max for an aesthetic athlete.
Where form matters more,
or a sports
technique
athlete.
matters, and if that breaks, you might be in trouble.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Like
Self reassurance and encouragement gets involved with that too. Because like you said, you allow them to push that bubble right before the deload too, so it gives them a chance to see what you've been doing. Like, are you doing exactly what you've been trained to do? Have you been learning the entire time, or is this more of a just kind of like, are we passing the time?
Right. So, absolutely. Yeah. So I think they're important. I think it's important to know how and when to use them, and just I think that comes down to the coach. Coach got to make that judgment call. Does the athlete need it? Yeah. Some athletes don't always know. Some athletes will just keep pushing until they literally have an injury, and then we're in really bad shape, right? Then we have to take more than a deload off, and we don't want that. Right. So sometimes I think I might even throw a deload a little early, earlier than maybe they need it. But I'd almost rather get them healthy and recovering well, maximal recover volume, right? Where that number is, we can never know. It varies day to day how much they can handle. So giving them a deload, or at least planning, hey, sometime around this week, this period, we're going to go ahead and deload.
Have it in the structure, but not necessarily there.
Absolutely.
So like for strength training though, you just to sum it up, it's look at intensity first. Intensity is largely born out of the load they're moving, and then compound that with how they're feeling, what's the RPEs at.
Yep.
And you don't put it in there specifically at any time. It's kind of floating out there for when you start hearing that idea.
Yep.
That, hey, I'm hurting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
When it comes to like athletic performance, a little bit more cardiovascular, do you think you want more deloads in there, or do you think you can kind of go longer without needing a deload?
I think it varies on again, especially again at the beginning of it has to do with the athlete alone. How well are they performing on their own terms, as well as are they pushing themselves to that 100%. But then you also have to delegate when that 100% should be allowed. The environment too alone, depending on what sport it is. Are we talking about like more use of the legs, the core?
Football versus soccer, one is much more explosive versus
we have a lot more stop and go situations with football, whereas with soccer it's a constant movement pattern. You're having to like adjust your speed throughout the game. Agility turns into effect too. You have athletes who are like well-rounded at everything, and then you have athletes like, I can only function at this type of sport because it's all I know. Yeah. The big thing is too is that environment to places such as that.
Oh yeah, the heat.
Exactly. Yeah. So for example, I've always told people that if you want to get better at running for endurance purposes, train in the cold weather because it does expand your lungs, so you're allowed to withstand when you get to the heat in the summertime, the hotter atmospheres. And that point, you're not having to gasp for air so much because your lungs have been able to basically develop underneath while you're doing more of the agility training, core development. Weight training can be involved with it too as well. I never tell anyone to alleviate or remove weight training from athletic performance, but do focus on movement patterns that correlate towards the sport that you're actually
specific.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So because you have a lot of individuals who are like, I really want to get my squat up and stuff. Like, well, we're not really worried about how much you can move, but how do you move it over the course of a period of 30 seconds to a minute, or over the course of a period of you've got to cover a distance now with that, so it's a lot of people get pushed to a button that they're not really familiar with, and they kind of shortchange themselves. So that's when you have that self-reassurance, that encouragement, allowing that. When it comes down to the deloading part of it, I actually have multiple deloads that go through with athletic training, because you have those days where you come in where I'm just really sore all over because they're activating stabilizer muscles they're not familiar with. But mobility and recovery.
So you wouldn't even do a week. So I don't even know if I said that.
Specific deload.
It could a day.
It could be a day. It could be 2 days.
Go ahead and back off, almost like
right.
regulation.
They could come in there and have wind sprints. They could come, carries of certain types of lifts. They could end up doing more core training on one day, and then it could be overloaded from the hips down. So I want to take a break from a lot of jarring motions, a lot of quick,
impactful.
Yeah, exactly.
Running, jumping,
right.
sprinting.
The more impact that's involved, at some point your body's going to tell you, I have to take a break. You know, it doesn't matter how strong you are. Like, I can't function under these conditions right now. Right. So the recovery time then takes the place, because you could wake up $1 million and then a couple hours later you just feel like crap. You know, it's you're tired. You know, for natural exhaustion.
Yeah.
But when it comes to deload, like, there's no percentages involved in that too. And when it comes to athletic training, I'm not worried about how much. Again, like, I'm not worried about how much we're doing. It's are we actually optimizing the most of our stabilizers, our muscles, our cardiovascular health? Are we pushing ourselves too much to the point that we're not giving us a chance to recover and allow for individual recovery systems, such as the low impact, the lower halves, the upper halves, the core? More like almost correlating with bodybuilding, you know. So it's how you take both of those sports, like strength training, powerlifting, for example, bodybuilding, more aesthetic, placing those in with the athletic. And again, depending on what sport you're really going for, is the exercise or the exercise routine and general regimen, are you utilizing that for what you're trying to train for?
Right.
Or are you just trying to...
Are you going too hard in the gym and then it screws you over on the field?
Exactly, There's some people who, like, you know, over
you need to recover before that sport play at least, and take some time off to relax.
You know, are we training too hard and you have a week, we have a game coming up? Like, why are we training to an intense position if you have a game coming up in a couple of days, you know? So you have to be prepared, because when that game comes, you want to be 100%. You don't want to be 60-70% because you had a great day in the gym Monday, but your game on Friday you were terrible because you were just really gassed out.
Because you had to hit a 1-rep max on the bench press. Like, okay, that was
just to
that
prove
was
a
stupid.
point. Exactly.
Like, you want to throw a ball far, you don't need to maximize bench press. Like, that's not necessary. It may help just strengthen the shoulders and chest, but you don't need to be an absolute bench press master.
Exactly, because I know we're also working with coordination too. Like, hand-to-eye coordination comes in like so many things.
Trying to say strength athletes are slow and
really fast in one direction.
I mean, I am the largest guy in the room. That's right. That's why they call me tiny.
But factual statements as if they're insults, okay?
But more importantly, man, like, at the end of the day, like, it's not taking away from that individual. It's allowing them to
rest and recovery.
Yeah, you know,
I think that's kind of the big topic that deloads are doing is rest, recover, because the big thing is you're tearing down your muscles in the gym. You don't get big in the gym. You get big recovering from the gym. And I think that's, you know, if it's an athletic training, it might be more day specific, where it's like, hey, we just got to take a break from all this impactful plyo work we're doing, or cutting and agility work, and where it's strength, it's like, we just got to take some of that load off you to let you rest from that. And then bodybuilding, I think, lands somewhere right in between those two, in the sense that it's the more isolated movements. You're not doing huge compound things that require so much form, and you're also it's not as intense via the load. It's more intense from just the volume of the work, which is a little more endurance. It's a little less strength specific. I think to keep in mind with deloads is there's really two functions that they serve. Recovery, so that you either look or perform your best. We'll say look your best as it pertains to bodybuilding, and then recovery in the sense that you can continue your next cycle of training. I think deloads can be structured out much longer in a bodybuilding kind of block than something like strength training, or not nearly as day specific as something like athletic conditioning.
Right.
But I know people who have worked out for years and never deloaded. And I think...
Well, and I wonder what phase... Sorry, I don't mean to... as far as bodybuilding, right? Because typically they'll go through a bulking phase, right? They're trying to pack on mass.
So you have this whole other component.
And then the cutting phase, which is a very sensitive time where they're in a deficit, like they're fragile, you know? So that's going to...
I would argue that that's where you... Again, if you're in a deficit, it's one of those times that you may want to push yourself harder. I know it's going to be mentally tougher, but you have to provide that stimulus on the musculature to say, hey, you need to stick around. Because muscle is a very expensive tissue, and the body wants to get rid of it.
Excellent word choice. Love that.
So if the body wants to get rid of it because it is so expensive, you have to provide that outside stimulus that says, no, I'm going to need you because I need to lift these weights the next day. So that all your resources are going to repairing and recovering that musculature. Particularly while in a deficit. Now, if you're about to step on stage, that's where, that week out, people generally draw back on the weights and they deload so that the muscles recover. You up your carbs a couple days before, so you fill out the musculature, you look better, all that sort of. You refeed yourself, get ready for that stage show. But if it's in kind of a general setting where, hey, I'm just lifting to look good naked, then great, keep doing what you're doing, diet down a little bit, maybe you don't need to go as hard. At some point in time, it is going to be, if not a mental fatigue, it will be a physical fatigue.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's not one of those things that you need to say to yourself, like, I would say the strength deload is much more kind of extreme in the sense that the loads are coming down, and then the volumes, the sets and reps are coming up to a point that almost matches bodybuilding. Whereas in bodybuilding, it's maybe like take a set off the top.
Yeah.
Keep your loads the same. Don't do as many sets. Take a week to do that, and then go kind of right back into it. I put it as a transitionary period between, I'd say, like 8 to 12. After 8 to 12 weeks, we look to, all right, let's deload a little bit, and then let's put in a new exercise selection just for variation, and such that it gives you kind of a mental break from what you did prior, and allows us to kind of get ready to do these new things, and allows, again, just recovery. That's it. Remember that you've got to be able to recover. And I think for the viewers, if it's one of those things that, hey, should I deload? Have an honest conversation with yourself. If your numbers are trending up in everything, in strength, athletics, or bodybuilding, if numbers are still going up in your programming, numbers such as load, reps, sets, if those are still going up, you honestly do not need a deload.
Totally.
But if you say to yourself, I'm hating going to the gym right now, everything hurts, my joints are achy, then
technique breakdown, mentally checking out, like if you're disinterested, that's a good sign that
and I'd say if you're checking off a couple of those things on the list, then guess what?
It's probably
take a week to deload. I would say that I would err on the side of deloading versus not deloading, as long as it's saved for no less than every 4 weeks.
Totally.
You tough through it if you can for less than 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But
I think
err on the side of it so
you
get the
recovery.
recovery.
It is very true.
Yeah.
I feel like that correlates to all three, because at some point you have to give yourself a chance to get to that, almost like earn the deload.
Exactly.
Essentially.
100%. Yeah. Like how much time does it take to actually earn a deload, and that's difficult. But I would say if it's less than 3 weeks, you're going too hard too fast.
Yeah, right.
You're gonna burn out quickly. You're probably working with percentages or a volume amount that it's gonna be almost impossible to recover, or you're running too hard too quick. Like you're staying at a certain speed on the field that like you said, soccer is not just sprints. It's sprints followed by a leisure jog. Then you literally stop. Then you sprint, and then the speed is always changing. It's like if you had your athletes go out there and just did sprints for an hour, they'd be wrecked. They wouldn't be able to practice for a while. Right. So it's like it's important to make sure that like you're managing intensity, difficulty.
Well, I believe then that should close it out. Yeah. If you need deloads, take them. Earn them though.
Thanks, guys.